Hello everyone, Scruffy Golden here. Probably the biggest change on the hiker trailers over the last 5 years is the addition of a fridge box on the chassis tongue. When I placed the order for my first hiker trailer back in 2017, the small toolbox was, and still is, standard, but hiker trailer didn't offer any kind of storage options on the tongue beyond that. Owners were left to their own ingenuity to figure out how best to use that tongue space. I was one of the first to use that space for a refrigerator, and I had to have a custom box built to house the power plant in the remaining space. But since that time, hiker trailer has had a quick progression of storage boxes, and I must not be the only one that likes putting the fridge up there in the front, because now the box is actually called a fridge box. Off-road refrigerators have grown in size over the years, and so have the fridge boxes offered by Hiker. Even so, when I decided to buy my second hiker trailer, I was still worried that the refrigerator I had in mind wouldn't fit inside that latest fridge box. Fortunately, hiker trailer was just starting to offer a taller fridge box to fit the bill, but not without some modifications. In this video, I'll show you what modifications I made and how I made them. And in a future video, I'll show you why I went through so much trouble for the ARB Zero Dual Zone Fridge Freezer. Trust me, the results were totally worth the effort. Let me show you. One of the best decisions I made on my first hiker trailer was to put the refrigerator and power plant on the tongue of the trailer. At that time, I went with an ARB Elements refrigerator that sat out in the open and had a custom box built to house the power plant. With the fridge box supplied by hiker trailer, I don't have to build a custom box this time, but I was concerned that the fridge I had in mind wouldn't fit. The ARB Zero is a beast just sitting on the ground, but for the fridge to function in an enclosed box, it needs one hell of a fridge slide that can extend beyond the opening and safely hold the fridge while extended out into space. The fridge slide I'm using is a Tembo Tusk slide that does this, but adds 3 inches to the total height. The ARB Zero is 18.5 inches wide, and the fridge box opening is 19.25 inches wide, so we have barely more than an inch to work with on the width. With regards to the height, we have a little more room to work with. The box opening is 26 7/8 inches tall, which is almost 27 inches. And though the fridge is 21 3/4 inches tall, the fridge slide adds a little more to that amount once we've adjusted it to clear the lip of the fridge box. It's a tight fit, no doubt about it. In addition to getting the fridge to fit, we need room for the power plant equipment and a way to secure everything so that it all survives the bumps and vibrations of off-road trips. Hiker trailer promised the dimensions would work, but upon delivery, I realized a couple of things. The box itself is made of large, thin aluminum panels that would easily bend and break if not for the thick aluminum angle brackets on the interior. These angle brackets double as shelf brackets, but they prevented the fridge from fitting, and they take up so much space that the power plant equipment would never fit. Furthermore, there's no way to mount anything to those thin aluminum panels. The solution I've come up with is to remove the angle brackets and bolt plywood to the interior walls. This will add some weight, but it will provide even greater support and rigidity than the brackets did. It will also completely open up the interior and allow me to screw appliances to the walls if need be. The tools I used for this project were mostly straightforward. I needed both wrenches and sockets for this one, as well as a drill. In addition to regular drill bits, I also needed a Forstner bit to drill partway through a board so that a washer would lie flush. If you don't know what a Forstner bit is, don't worry. I'll show you in the video, but it's just a different kind of drill bit. If you do decide to get one for yourself, just know that you can buy these one at a time for a few dollars. You don't need to buy a whole set. Now, to ensure I drilled clean, accurate holes on those thin aluminum walls, I used a hole punch. Drilling could have been done without this tool, but it makes the process so much easier and more precise. I also used a circular saw to cut the plywood panels. Now, eye, hand, and ear protection are always important, but they're an absolute requirement on this project. One tool you may not have in your toolbox is this oscillating Dremel tool. If you don't have one of these, you may want to pick one up. They sell for less than $100 and come in handy in countless ways. Another item you may not have in your toolkit, but is essential for waterproofing your work on this project, is what's called butyl tape. A roll of this is around $14, and a little goes a long way. In fact, I'm still on the first roll I bought 5 years ago. For hardware, I used 8 number 20 bolts that are 1/4 inch diameter and 1 1/4 inches long. Similarly, I also used 4 bolts that were also 1/4 inch diameter number 20s, but were only 3/4 of an inch long. I used approximately 12 1/4 inch fender washers along with appropriate nylock nuts. Lastly, for painting everything, I used black Rust-Oleum High Heat Ultra spray paint. Okay, let's get into it. Since I will need to access all 6 sides of the fridge box, I started by removing it from the trailer. The fridge box is secured to the trailer by bolts that run through the aluminum panel that is welded to the chassis tongue. To remove the box, I simply removed the bolts, but I did need one of my kids to keep the top of the bolt from spinning while I unscrewed the nut from below. Fortunately, the angle brackets are spot welded to the wall, so only the welds need to be cut to remove them. To cut the welds, I'm using a Dremel tool with a flat metal cutting blade that oscillates from side to side. Now, cutting these welds creates very sharp aluminum metal shrapnel that will fly off and embed in your skin or even your eyes. It is extremely important to wear safety glasses and gloves to protect your eyes and hands. Now, I can't remember exactly how long this took, but it took several hours to remove these brackets. And that's a long time to be exposed to the vibration and elevated noise. Gloves will help dampen the vibration, but even with gloves, my hands were uncomfortably buzzy after the first day. And hearing protection is absolutely essential. Without earplugs, the possibility of hearing damage in this case is very real. Now, the wall panels are very thin, so I needed to be extremely careful not to cut through the panels or to make things so hot that I warped or melted the metal. To do this, I tried to keep the blades as flat as possible and went as slow as I felt necessary. It feels like I was doing this forever, but it was a huge relief to pull away the last angle bracket knowing I hadn't made a single mistake. Now, the walls were pretty ugly when I finished. I mean, it's impossible not to scratch the coating on the walls as I worked through these brackets, but that's okay since the floor and the walls will be covered in plywood when we're done. Even so, I don't want the walls to rust, and frankly, I just couldn't bear to leave the walls looking like this, so after the last bracket was removed, I vacuumed up as much of the metal slivers as possible. Then I took a damp sponge to remove any remaining dirt, pollen, or debris. So with the box as clean as I could get it, I took some Rust-Oleum, high heat spray paint, and covered those scratches. Whenever I needed a break from cutting the brackets, I turned my attention to the plywood that would cover the floor and walls, as well as the hardware that would hold the plywood in place. After taking measurements, I cut the boards to size and laid them out in the lawn where I could paint them black. I could have left them unpainted, but I just think this looks better. I also painted the bolts and washers as well, since they will be exposed on the outside. Again, I thought it would look better, although in this case, we're also providing some rust protection. Now, the floorboard covers the entire floor of the fridge box and needs to go in first. It will be secured by the bolts that hold the fridge box to the trailer. The fridge slide will be bolted to this board. Now, dry fitting the slide assembly and fridge many times made me realize that the 3/4 inch plywood is not quite thick enough for the fridge slide to clear that lip on the front of the fridge box. To remedy this, I found a thin piece of plywood that was about 1/8 inch thick, and I will place this between the floorboard and the floor of the box when I bolt the fridge back onto the trailer. The wall boards rest on the floorboard and will be secured by bolts through the fridge walls. The boards do not cover the entire surface of the walls, however, as dry fitting made me realize that they would interfere with the fridge and the fridge slide. So the boards are attached to the walls using 8 number 20 bolts that are 1/4 inch in diameter and 1¼ inches long. In the corners where there is no plywood, I will be installing bolts simply for aesthetics. These bolts are also number 20s and also 1/4 inch in diameter, but they're only 3/4 inch long, so they don't interfere with the fridge and the fridge slide inside. Washers are 1/4 inch fender washers that are 1¼ inches in diameter. Even though the bolts in the back of the box will be right up against the trailer and thus won't be visible, I wanted the bolts on both the front and back to be symmetrical and thus located in the same spot. There will be a bolt in each corner of each panel, as well as a bolt top middle and bottom middle. The front of the box has these metal jack mounts on the top left and top right. I knew I needed the top corner bolts to go to the inside of these jack mounts, so that dictated the distance from the edge. This meant that all 4 corner bolts on each side would be 6 3/4 inches from the ends of the box. I decided to align the center of the top bolts with the center of the jack mounts, so this puts all of the top row bolts 2 inches from the top of the box on both sides. The bottom row of bolts needs to be placed so that they are above the highest point of the fridge slide on the interior. Otherwise, they would come in contact with the slide and ruin it, or at least prevent it from working. With this in mind, I traced a line on the inside of the box at the highest point of the fridge slide assembly. This proved to be 6 1/4 inches from the bottom of the box. So I placed the bottom row of bolts on the outside 7 1/4 inches from the bottom. After making all my marks for the corner bolts, I simply centered the middle bolts between my marks. Having said all of that, remember that the plywood does not extend into the fridge area of the box, so bolts at the fridge end of the box are not actually needed. I did put shorter bolts on the front wall, however, for aesthetics, but I did not do this on the back since there's no way to see see those, and I don't want more holes than necessary. In the middle of figuring all this out, Colorado blessed us with one of its beautiful spring showers, which gives me a chance to say that if you found this video useful or helpful so far, I would appreciate it if you whack the like button, that this video can spread to more people who could also use it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Okay, it's time to start putting things together. Bottom board goes in first, and it will be secured by the bolts that hold the fridge box to the trailer. Now I want to use the bolt holes that are already in the box, so I clamped the bottom board into place and drilled up from below using the existing holes as my guides. I bolted the board down temporarily and turned my attention to the wall boards. Okay, so it really pays to check and double check your measurements, especially before we go punching a hole through this beautiful box. When I first drew this center mark here, I noticed that the one up above wasn't right. Turns out the one up above was an inch off. Instead of 20 7/8, it was 21 7/8, something that would probably show up on the video when I look at it later, and eagle-eyed viewers would have almost certainly noticed. So I think we're gonna do another round of checks here, and then we're gonna dry fit it again and see if everything works. Okay, this is the moment of no return. After another round of checking my marks and measurements, it's time to drill the holes into the fridge box walls. I started on the back of the box in case there was a learning moment that could be hidden later. One of my favorite tools is a hole punch, which is extremely important on this soft, thin metal wall. For starters, I can ensure that the hole I drill is incredibly centered on the mark. More importantly though, it prevents the drill bit from skittering around when I first start drilling. This skittering around would scratch the hell out of the finish and would likely result in a hole that's not perfectly centered. After drilling the holes, I place a piece of butyl tape into the hole and between the washer and wall panel. The butyl tape prevents water from working its way into the hole and weatherproofs the whole connection. As I tighten the nut on the other side of the bolt, the rubbery butyl tape squeezes out and it's easily trimmed with a toothpick. With the first bolt in place, it was time to rinse and repeat with the rest of the marks. I simply moved to each position, drilled a hole through the panel and interior board, placed a piece of butyl tape over that hole, inserted a bolt with a washer on each side through the hole, and secured the combination with a nylock nut so they wouldn't loosen from vibrations while traveling. I did this until each of the bolts was in place. With the wall boards in place, I moved the fridge box back to the trailer to finish the installation. After yet another dry fit, I realized that the bolts and washers of the floorboard were actually going to prevent the fridge slide from sitting flat. So I chucked a Forstner bit into my drill and recessed both the bolts and washers so that they would sit below the surface of the board. It can take some contortioning and working by feel to hold the top of the bolt in place while screwing the nut from the underside, but it ultimately gets completed. I can't tell you how good it feels to see the box back in place on the trailer and secure. With the box securely in place on the trailer and all of the boards secured to the box, I dry fitted the fridge slide yet one more time. With everything looking good, I secured the fridge slide to the floorboard by drilling pilot holes, vacuuming up the mess, and screwing the fridge slide permanently into place. I dry fitted the slide and fridge countless times through this process, but I was still nervous when I tested the fridge this one last time. I can't tell you how good it feels to see this all come together without a mistake. The box looks and functions great. The fridge box is an awesome addition to an awesome trailer. I already appreciate the extra storage, convenience, and security that it provides, and after months of planning and worrying that this beast of a fridge wouldn't fit, it all came together perfectly. With the box modifications completed, it's time to install the refrigerator and build the rest of the power plant. Those videos are on the way, so hit the subscribe button to be notified of when they drop. But until then, live without compromise, and I'll see you out there.